I'm Éanna Ní and this lesson is about native trees. So I've come along to St Anne's Park because here in St Anne's Park we have a native tree trail set up by Dublin City Council, and they were advised of course by the Tree Council of Ireland. So this tells us what a native tree is. Do we know what a native tree is?
Yeah.
What's a native tree?
It's all the trees in Ireland that are only for Ireland, and that's what we are learning about this year.
Very good. So these trees were always here in Ireland. They were never brought by people. They came by themselves, didn't they?
Yeah.
So the seeds blew here, or the birds brought the seeds, or nuts came. And the native trees are better than other trees. I wonder why. Why are they better?
Because they can only grow in one country, and the ones that are not native, they can grow in any country.
Well, that's not really, that's one way of saying it, but the native trees in Ireland are really important because they have lots of creepy crawlies, lots of wildlife in it. They're really good for biodiversity.
Yeah.
So we have oak trees, we have ash trees, we've got a whole list of them. 28 native trees is what we have in Ireland, which is a very small list when you think of tropical rainforests and places like that where they have hundreds of trees. But nonetheless, our native trees are really, really good, aren't they? So, can we look at the board on it? You point me out a native tree there. Look, the whole list of them and a map. So what we'll do is we'll use some of these trees to talk about them, and we'll go around the nature trail here. So that's what we'll do when we're on the next tree. I'm Éanna Ní and this lesson is on the alder tree. So look at this great big alder tree we have in your school grounds. Isn't it very large? Oh, and it's very windy today. Now how do we know it's an alder tree? We know it's an alder tree because when we look at the leaves, look at all the leaves on it, they're like heart-shaped leaves. The top of them is gone. Do you like heart shapes? Yeah, and mostly trees have nuts or berries, but this tree is special because it's got cones on it. Male cones and female cones. Which cones do you think might be the biggest?
Female.
You're right, because the male cones only have the pollen in it, and the female cones then are nice and big, and they have the seeds. So next spring they open up and the seeds fly away and we get a new cone. Now, this tree is really important for the soil because it's able to take nitrogen in its roots straight from the air and make the soil even better. Isn't that great? So by having this tree in our school grounds, it's improving the soil of the school grounds. The Irish for this tree is called the Farn Oak, and lots of places in County Cavan are called after this. So we like the alder tree, don't we?
Yeah.
So that's our lesson on the alder tree. I will have another lesson shortly. I'm Éanna Ní and this lesson is about the ash tree. Now the ash tree is probably one of our biggest native species, and it used to form canopies. Long ago in Ireland there was woodlands of ash on the good soil. Now if we look at the leaves of the ash tree, you can see how many leaflets it has. Who'd like to count the leaflets? Okay, let's count.
1,
2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11. There's 11 on this one. And ash still around in every hedgerow. And what do they make out of ash trees, do you know? What do they make?
They make strawberries.
No, they don't make strawberries out of ash trees. They make hurleys out of ash trees and they play hurling out of it. But the ash itself has lovely buds. Look at it. It's the only tree with black buds. They're like sheep's toes. Look at them. So we can see the buds on the ash tree. The only tree, in fact, in Ireland that has black buds, black pointy buds. So in the wintertime, when you've no leaves, you always know the ash because of the black pointy buds. Now every year the trees get their leaves. There's always the first tree and there's always the lazy last tree. Well, the ash tree is the lazy last one. It doesn't get its leaves until the middle of May. And they used to say there was a race between the ash and the oak, and whoever got its leaves last would tell us about the weather. So the ash before the oak will have a soak, and the oak before the ash will just have a dash of rain. But actually the ash is always last, and we're always hoping for a dash of rain in the summertime. So this is it, a really big tall tree. We're worried about ash at the moment because they have a disease that is attacking them, and if that really takes, we'll have no trees left in the country at all. So we'll have to hope that this disease of the ash tree doesn't take in Ireland. Yeah, they're the lovely black buds. Look, they're like sheep's toes, aren't they?
They look like
sheep's toes. Now, if we get the seeds on the ash tree, they come in bunches and they're called keys, because you have a bunch of keys and the keys have little wings on them and they blow away in the wind.
They're called helicopter seeds.
No, they're on the sycamore. These ones are on the ash.
I know why they have those kind of keys, because they look like keys.
They look like keys. They're in bunches, yeah.
How long does this last?
How long will the ash tree can grow for a very long time. We could have an ash tree growing for 200 or 300 years. So a really, really important tree in Ireland as part of our ash woodlands. I'm Éanna Ní Lamhna, and this lesson is on the aspen tree. Now here we have an aspen tree, and look at it. What do we notice about it? We notice about it that the leaves are always shaking like they're afraid. And there's a great story about the aspen tree. Apparently, long, long ago, Mother Nature had spoons, and somebody stole the spoons and she hadn't got them any longer. And she asked all the trees, "Do you know who stole my spoons?" And the aspen tree was afraid and said, "Oh, I don't know," and shook and shook. But the aspen tree did know who stole the spoon. She told a lie to Mother Nature, and it was a different tree, a poplar tree. So when Mother Nature found out that she told a lie, she said, "You're always going to be shaking with fear because you told me a lie." And look at them, shaking away all the leaves, shaking away because they're still afraid of Mother Nature. But of course, that's only a story really, isn't it? This aspen tree is actually one of our poplar trees, and it's the only native species we have. And poplar trees have catkins on them in springtime. Before the leaves come, the catkins come, and the wind blows the pollen from the catkins. And then there's little seeds in the autumn time. It's a really, really nice tree, and the Irish word for it is Uncrán, the shaking tree. So do we think it's a shaking tree?
Yeah.
Look at them shaking away, look at them all waving at us. So little roundy leaves with long stalks, Uncrán. That's the lesson on the aspen tree. My name is Éanna Ní Lamhna, and this lesson is on the Downey Birch. The Downey Birch is one of two native species of birch that we have in Ireland. It's quite a big tree, as you can see, and it has good big leaves, bigger than the other one. Now this Downey Birch is called Downey because there's an actual little downy sheen on the leaves that makes it like that. Now, it's very big, isn't it? And it's like the other birch, like the silver birch. Both birch trees have actually got catkins on them, which means that they don't have flowers. The wind has to come and blow the pollen about. So it gets its catkins early in the year before the leaves come, because it'd be an awful waste to have all your catkins and leaves as well, because the pollen would just blow on top of the leaves and be wasted, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, we have plenty of wind in Ireland, don't we?
Yeah.
Well, the Irish word for birch is behi. So places like Kilbehy are called after the birch tree. So long ago, people called places after the trees that grew there. So birch trees, very good. We could really climb up this when it's so big. Do you like climbing trees?
Yeah.
Well, we might climb up the Downey Birch later.
Is then the best tree to climb?
Oh, the best tree to climb is one with low branches that you won't fall off and hurt yourself.
Oh, we have 4 birches in our school. I think they're all silver birch. I can't remember how much there is, but I think it's for my garden as well. We have there's always catkins on them.
There's always catkins on them, but the pollen is in the catkins in springtime. So we might have a go at climbing later on, mightn't we?
Yeah, when so you know the way I have 4 silver birches in my garden, one's not growing any leaves. Do you think it might be dead or not?
I think it might be dead. If you don't have any leaves, then you can't make any food. And if you can't make any food, well, would you live without any food? So if it has no leaves for a whole year, I think it's Amshirkatcha. But this one is not Amshirkatcha. This is a lovely Downey Birch. I'm Éanna Ní and this lesson is about the silver birch. I really love silver birches, and here's a lovely grove of them. Now, how do we know they're silver birches?
Because they have the white bark.
They have silver bark, very good, and look at the lovely shiny bark on them. I see there's ivy growing on the bark, but of course ivy doesn't do them any harm.
No.
Ivy is a place where other creepy crawlies can live, so it's good for
like
them.
That snail up there.
Absolutely. Now, if we look at the leaves of the ivy, look at the leaves of the birch, we can see that they have lovely triangular leaves. And they're called the lady of the wood because they're so elegant. See this lovely triangular leaf? I don't think any other tree has a lovely little triangular leaf like this. Something's been eating that one. Look at it.
Yeah, I think a caterpillar might have.
It might have done or something like that. This is the leaf of the silver birch. A lovely little triangular leaf, in fact. One of the most elegant of leaves. Something's been having a go at this. There's a big hole in the middle of it. Look, caterpillar must have been gobbling it. Now they're beginning to change colour. Look, they're going golden in colour because when they fall off, all the food in the leaves will be wasted. They're all working leaves. So before they fall off, the tree has to take the food out of them. So that's why they're turning yellow. And then when they get all the food out of them, they'll fall down in autumn time. And in springtime, of course, we get catkins on them. And the wind pollinates the catkins by blowing them. And we get lovely little seeds. So this is the birch.
Yeah.
And it's the lady of the wood. And I think it might be my favourite tree. I'm Éanna Ní and this lesson is about the Blackthorne Tree. And I have a lovely blackthorn here behind me and lovely berries on it which are called sloes. And they have the most beautiful bloom on them. When I was going to school, me and Finn McCool about 100 years ago, we used to have competitions. Who could eat a sloe without making a face? Yeah, I still can't do it. They're the sourest things. You feel as if your face is going down your throat. They're not poisonous, but boy do they taste very sour. Now the sloe that grows on the blackthorn tree, and the Irish word for the blackthorn tree is undrainon, and it's covered in thorns. See, look at the length of the thorns. So these are the sloes. You can see them close up. They have a lovely shine, a lovely bloom on them, and of course they're food for the birds. And of course the tree itself has enormous thorns on it, so this is why it's called the blackthorn. Now the word that we used in Dundalk for thorns were docks. Docks is a Norse word. So Dalkey Island comes from that same word dock, that the actual Norwegian word for a thorn on the blackthorn tree. Now there's walking sticks called shillelaghs that people have long ago, and they made them from the blackthorn tree as well. So this is a member of the plum family, and obviously they're making better plums now than then, because plums are lovely sweet fruit, but the wild plums were actually the sloes from this tree here. Irish word for sloe is Arne. So Killarney in County Kerry, Killarney, the church of the sloes. So that doesn't mean the people down there are slow. It just means that they built their church where there were blackthorn trees. I'm Éanna Ní and this lesson is on the cherry tree, the wild cherry, or the bird cherry as it's called. Now in Ireland we actually have wild cherry trees. We sometimes think the cherry tree is that Japanese thing with the pink blossoms on it. But that's actually from Japan, it's not native here at all. This is our native cherry and it has white flowers on it in the month of April. And of course, who loves flowers on trees? The bees do, don't they? So the bees come looking for pollen and they pollinate the tree. So what kind of fruits will we get on the cherry tree? Cherries, exactly. And we get lovely wild cherries in the months of July and August. And of course, the birds love those, don't they? So here we are in September and there's no cherries left, which is such a pity, isn't it? But the leaves are lovely and it looks exactly like any other kind of a fruit tree in the garden. They're nice small roundy leaves like these with the points on the ends. And it doesn't grow very large because, like fruit trees, it's an understory in the woodland. So shilleen is the Irish word for a cherry tree. And it's quite rare in Ireland to get it in the wild. So we're very lucky to have one here in St. Anne's Park. So that's it, the cherry tree. Hello, I'm Éanna Ní and this lesson is on the wild cherry. Now the wild cherry, as you can see, is a really big tree for a cherry tree because after all, these are fruit trees. And the wild cherry is native to Ireland and likes to live in places where the soil is nice and calcareous. This wonderful specimen is here in the Botanic Gardens and I'd say it must be at least 50 years old. Look at the lovely bark it has. See, the bark is all broken up in bits and that's a great place for creepy crawlies because you'd have things like spiders and snails and things hiding inside the bark. Now at this time of the year, of course, we don't have any cherries on it because the cherries come out in the summertime, don't they? Do we like cherries? Do you like cherries? You like cherries, do you? Aren't they very nice? And of course we get lovely white flowers on this cherry tree in April and May and the bees and the other insects come to that and carry the pollen around. So it's very good for our pollinators. But this tree is very big for a cherry tree and it's doing really well. It probably likes being here, doesn't it? Yeah. So will we spend some time poking in the bark to see if we find some creepy crawlies? Yeah. That's what we'll do. So thank you. This is the end of my lesson now and we're going to look for creepy crawlies. Let's poke and have a look. Come on. I'm Éanna Ní and this lesson is about the crabapple tree. Now crab apples, that sounds nasty, doesn't it? Crabs are crabapple sweet? No, they're not, they're really sour. Look at them. Here's the crab apples, tiny little apples on the tree. And they were the original wild apples. So the lovely big apples we get in our gardens come from gardeners making the crab apples bigger and sweeter and nicer. So I wonder who would like to eat a crab apple. Probably the birds. And the birds, like the thrushes and the blackbirds, absolutely love apples. So lots of people plant crabapple trees in their garden for the birds. Now I like crab apples because you can make crabapple jelly out of it. Do you ever have crabapple jelly? Oh, it's lovely and pink and it's gorgeous and you have it on your bread and it's really nice. So the apples on this are nearly ripe now, so they're lovely and yellow. And they're quite small. They never grow any bigger than that because these are the original apples. Eaten apples in the garden are derived by the gardeners from these small original apples. Now this crabapple tree is really big. Look, Cronfiorul it's called.
Wow.
And a place in Wexford called Oulart is called after this tree. Imagine. So it's got its nice leaves on it. It gets its apple flowers in springtime and the apples are here now in the autumn time waiting for the birds to come and gobble them up. Obviously the squirrels don't like them because they're still here.
Good.
But anyway, you know, it doesn't have to be sweet to be nice. And this is a really, really nice crabapple tree. I'm Éanna Ní and this lesson is on the elder tree. And here we have a lovely big elder tree in the grounds of the school. Do you like elder trees?
Yeah.
Well, you wouldn't like them if you had to smell their leaves, because there's the most horrible smell of elder leaves. Isn't there a horrible smell of those? And the reason why is because it's supposed to be an unlucky tree. That's supposed to be the tree that Judas was hanged on. Imagine. But of course, that's not true. That's only a story. This is one leaf, and as you can see, there are 5 leaflets on it, which is very typical of the elder tree. This tree has lovely berries on it in the autumn time. Look at those lovely elderberries. And we can make wine from them. Only you, of course, wouldn't be drinking wine, would you? No, you wouldn't. In autumn, there are lovely shiny berries in bunches on it, which pigeons love to eat. And in springtime, we have the most beautiful elder flowers, which are really good for bees. What do bees do? They make honey and they go to the flowers to collect the nectar, don't they?
Yeah.
And this is very important for pollination to make the berries. And of course in the autumn time, the birds love to eat the berries. So it's really good to have a great big elder tree in our school grounds. And the Irish name for the elder tree is called Trim. And there's a town in County Meath called after the elder tree. And it's also called Trim. So that's my lesson on the elder tree. I'm Éanna Ní and this lesson is about the Gelder Rose. Now the Gelder Rose is a very unusual tree. It's not very common in Ireland. It needs to grow on calcareous soil and people don't know it. Look at it. And if you just saw the leaf by itself, you might think it's a sycamore leaf, because it looks like a sycamore leaf, really. But of course sycamore isn't native to Ireland and the Gelder Rose is. So it has lovely flowers on it in summertime, lovely white flowers like lace. And it's now autumn, and what happens to the flowers when they're finished flowering?
They die.
And they turn into berries. Look at the lovely berries we have. So lovely red berries on them. Half of them are gone. I wonder who ate the berries. Probably the birds, because the birds love berries. I wonder what's in the middle of a berry. Will we look and see? Ooh, lots of juice. And a big hard stone. And of course the bird will eat the berry, enjoy all the juice, and poo out the stone and grow a new Gelder Rose. This is the berry of the Gelder Rose. And if I squish it open, we can see there's a big seed in the middle of it. Whoops! There's a big seed in the middle of it, like a big stone. And of course, this is what the bird poos out to grow a new Gelder Rose. The leaves go a gorgeous golden colour in the autumn. Look, they're going red already because the tree is taking the food out of the leaves.
More.
Yeah, there's more leaves. Can you count 10 berries?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
Yeah, you have to look very. Yeah, you have to look very hard for those, because the whole bunch would have 10 on it. Only the birds have gobbled them up. So the birds are really busy. That's why they're red. The tree really wants the birds to eat its berries, so the seeds are sown. This is a fine Gelder Rose, bigger than we are.
They must be very rare.
Ah, well, they're in the Midlands of Ireland. They're not in people's gardens, really. But it grows quite big, so it definitely qualifies to be a tree. This is the Gelder Rose. I'm Éanna Ní and this lesson is about the Hawthorne Tree on Scac Gal. So here I am with a lovely Hawthorne Tree up in the Botanic Gardens. Now, if you look at the leaf of the Hawthorne Tree, you always know a hawthorn leaf. It looks like a mad baby infant was slicing it up with the scissors. It's all cut up. Look at it. This is the leaf of the Hawthorne Tree. It's got a really cut edge to it. Right, and do we have any berries on the Hawthorne Tree?
Yeah.
And what are they called?
Hawthorn berries.
No, they're just called haws. Haws. Now haws actually are not very sweet. So if you were...
Poisonous berries?
No, they're not poisonous. You can eat haws. They don't taste very nice. In fact, they used to say in Ireland, when you hadn't much, when all fruit fails, welcome haw. But they're not that bad actually, they're quite nice. Now, the thing is, this particular hawthorn tree is covered in bits and pieces. It's called a rag tree because there's a huge amount of magic associated with the hawthorn tree in Ireland. Because it was the one the fairies loved. The fairies like a hawthorn tree, and if you knock down a hawthorn tree, the fairies will get you. Because it's their special trees. They'll seek revenge, they will. Now, often in Ireland, hawthorn trees are planted beside holy wells. And people come to the holy wells for cures, and when they do, they put an offering on the tree beside it. So that's why this tree is all covered in rags. It's a rag tree. People have put the rags on in order to get a favour. Now, if you have anything to hang on the hawthorn tree, well, yeah, you go to hang them on. Lovely, lovely silver pieces, and you have a flower to put on it. Very good. You put them all on there.
Hey, there's a lovely branch down here. Hopefully my flower will fit.
Right, so you put on your flowers on the hawthorn tree, and hopefully then your wishes will be granted. On Scackgal, it's called on Scackgal because it's covered in blossoms at Maytime. And in Ireland we have an expression, cast no clout until May is out, which my mother used to say you have to wait till June to take off your vest. But actually it means when the flowers are on the May tree, you can then put on your summer clothes. So that's what they mean by the May bush, the hawthorn tree, the white beam, the white thorn tree. These are all different names for it. I'm Éanna Lona, and this lesson is on the hazel tree. And we're here in the presence of a very large hazel tree, and look how lovely big leaves it has. You always know a hazel tree because the leaves are lovely and soft. They're sort of hairy and they're lovely and soft. Now, an interesting thing about the hazel tree is if you look at the stem, there's a whole lot of stems. Yeah. They're all like sticks, aren't they? And as a result, this was a really useful tree in Ireland before they invented plastic. They used hazel for everything. They made baskets out of it, they made poles out of it, they made things called scullabs out of it. And scullabs were for keeping the thatch on your roof. Ní hé lá na gaoithe, lá na scullaba. So the day of the big wind wasn't the day to be fixing your thatch. Now this tree actually doesn't have flowers on it, it has catkins on it, which are wind flowers. Look at the catkins. And they're next year's ones. They're going to be ready next year to give us all the pollen. Okay, these are the catkins that I was looking at growing on the leaves themselves. And of course, these catkins will have their pollen when spring comes. Now, what kind of things do we get on the hazel tree?
Hazelnuts.
Hazelnuts. So where are the hazelnuts? There should be loads, shouldn't there? Do you see any?
No.
I don't see any. I wonder where they went.
I see zero.
Who eats hazelnuts?
Squirrels.
Squirrels, and the botanic gardens is full of squirrels. Yeah. I bet you they ate all the nuts.
I saw one running along and it kind of looked like it was carrying something.
And they carry them because they eat them in the winter because they're not asleep. They don't hibernate. They eat all our hazelnuts in the winter time. But then I suppose they need them, don't they?
Yeah.
So the hazel tree is the tree of wisdom.
Yeah.
And we could do with a lot of wisdom in Ireland, couldn't we? The Irish word for hazel is call, and a whole collection of hazel trees is called a quill. So quill, we think it's the name for a wood, but originally it meant loads and loads of hazel trees. Very, very useful trees, and one we could do with. Everybody should have a wisdom tree in their garden. I'm Éanna Lona, and this lesson is on the holly tree. So here's a lovely holly tree, and we can see the red berries on it. Now, we only get red berries on the female holly tree because there's male holly trees as well, and of course they wouldn't have berries, would they?
No.
No. So why do they have berries? Who eats berries?
Birds.
Birds. Now, if you ate a berry, what would you find in the middle of it? A stone. So if the bird eats this, he swallows the thing and the stone is inside in his tummy. So how is he going to get it out? Does he cough it up?
No.
Do you ever see a bird sitting on a tree coughing up stones?
No.
No. How does it come out?
From the poo.
It comes out of his poo. So he sits up in the tree, does it poo, and out comes the stone, and the holly tree grows underneath. So holly trees are evergreen. And what does that mean?
They always green.
So the leaves don't fall off in the winter time. So they're really prickly. So at Christmas time, when we want to bring something into the house and we go out, we find that there's still leaves on the holly trees. So long ago, way back in Neolithic times, in the Stone Age times, people brought them into their houses at Christmas to show that the sun was going to come back, that the year wasn't dead, that there was going to be light and sun again. So that's why we bring them in at Christmas nowadays, to show that the year is going to start all over again. So here's our holly. You can see how hard and prickly the leaves are, and this means that they don't have to fall off in the winter because the coating on the leaves stops them freezing. There's lovely red berries coming out on this one now, and when they're ripe they're really bright red, and of course that's how the holly reproduces. Now the Irish word for holly is Cullen, so there's lots of places in Ireland called after the holly. So we have Glencullen, we have Moycullen, and these are places where holly trees used to grow a long time ago. So they're really prickly, and as the tree gets taller, up at the top, we don't have prickles on the leaves. So I wonder why they have prickles. Why do they have prickles?
No, it's a high tree.
They have prickles to stop them being eaten. So the animals we have in Ireland, like the deer, are only this height. If we had giraffes in Ireland, they'd have to have prickles the whole way up, wouldn't we?
Yeah.
But do we have giraffes in Ireland? No, only in the zoo. So that's why it really works well. Nothing eats the prickly leaves down here, and the holly tree can grow. So there's my lesson on the holly tree. I'm Éanna Ní Lamhna, and this lesson is about the juniper tree, and I'm up here in the Botanic Gardens in the place that they have laid out like the burn. So we have all these slabs of limestone, and coming up in the crack is this tiny little tree called the juniper. Achel is called in Irish. Now we would have thought that that's not a tree at all, but the thing is, because there's hardly any space for its roots, it's like a bonsai, the way you get bonsai trees in Japan where they keep them very small. If we planted this properly, with lots of soil, it would grow up bigger than us. Now juniper were very important in Ireland long ago because it has lovely berries on it. Now these berries are only tiny, but when they're ripe they're black and they taste great. And they put them into things like gin and potsheen and dinners even to make them taste good. They're black, yeah, but they're very, very strong. You wouldn't actually eat them, they'd cut the mouth off you. But if you feel it, does it feel nice and smooth? Go on, give it. Or does it feel all prickly? Oh, it does. It feels horribly and prickly. And in fact, they used to use these long ago for sweeping chimneys, cutting bits off them and cleaning out soot from chimneys and things like this. So it was actually an important tree, even though this particular one is probably quite old, but just a bit old and bent and worn out. I'm Éanna Ní Lamhna, and this lesson is on the English oak, Quercus petraea, which is the Latin for an oak tree. Now we have two species of oak tree in Ireland. We have the Peduncular Oak and the Sessile Oak. This one is the Peduncular Oak. And what does a peduncle mean? A peduncle means a stalk, doesn't it? So why would you use a small word when you could use a big word? So instead of saying the stalked oak, we have to say the pedunculate oak. And where is the stalk? Is it on the leaf? No, it's on the acorn. So the acorn is like a pipe. It's got the little cup and egg cup, and then it has a stalk on it. But they're way up high. The squirrels have been collecting them, so we're not going to see any acorns today. But the leaves are typical. Look, the lovely loopy leaves that we always get on oak trees. And of course it's probably full of 284 different species of creepy crawlies. Hopefully not all at the same time. Do you like the bark, do you?
Yeah.
Lots of cracks in
It's my
it.
favourite tree, so yeah, I do like the bark.
Now, this is another king of the woods. It's called the English oak because it grows on the good soils. The Irish oak, the Sessile oak, grows on different soils, but this one grows on poorer soils, and as a result it was grown in the more acidic places in Ireland. Now, the bark of the oak was used for tanning, for making leather, and of course they used lots of the timbers from the oak to make roads, tokers, to make ships, to burn for charcoal. It was a really important Irish tree, and it was the king of the woodlands. If you cut down an oak tree in those days, you really got punished, because Irish people long ago really valued their oak trees. Okay, what's your question?
Why does the oak tree have so many creatures on it?
Because it is here for so long. It's a native tree, and the leaves taste great. The acorns are good food. There's plenty of space in the cracks for them to live, and there's lots of things. And I'm looking down here at the bottom, and look what I'm after finding.
An acorn.
An acorn.
No, it's not an acorn. This is a peduncular oak. The acorn should have a stalk on it. This is an oak apple. An oak apple is where a wasp, a gall wasp, don't pull it off or we won't have it. Look, have a look at it there. There's a wee hole in it. So we've got a wasp laying an egg on the bud of the oak tree. It grows into this gall, and then the little creature lives inside in that until it drills a hole and leaves. And it leaves this wooden marble behind. And the monks used them long ago to make black ink to write the Book of Kells. I'm Éanna Lowna, and this lesson is about the Irish oak on Dar Gaelach. Now, the oak tree is probably our native tree, and it's the king of the forest because it grows so tall. It's part of the canopy. And there's two types of oak tree in Ireland, and this one is the Sessile Oak. Now, when you say something is sessile, it means it has no stalk. So it's not the leaves that are sessile, that'd be too easy. It's the acorns, the nuts. And they sit on it, just like little cups sitting on the branches. We can have a look at those.
I see that the acorns look different than the ones that we have in our school.
Well, you
Well,
must have
we
a
have
different,
enough.
you might have a different oak tree there. This is the acorn of the Sessile Oak, and as you can see, it's sitting right down on the branch with no stalk. It's actually like an egg in an egg cup, and the egg part, of course, is the actual acorn itself. The other thing is just a holder of it. So oak trees are great for biodiversity. They tell us that there are 284 different species of insects. Now, mind you, I've never found more than 4 at any moment, but I suppose if you did a study or a PhD on it for about 20 years and counted everything you saw, you might get 284 different species. But anyway, the Irish for an oak tree is Dar, and there are counties in Ireland called after the oak tree. County Derry, Kildare is another one, and lots of places that begin with Derry are actually... Dublin has nothing to do with oak trees at all, I'm afraid. It's a Blackpool Doolin. But here we have it anyway. So here's our oak tree. Have you a question for me?
Yeah, how many oak trees are there in the world?
Oh, I don't know. Millions and millions and millions.
I'd say 2. I'd say you get about 2,000.
Right, well anyway, we're looking at this fellow here, and the leaves are loopy. It has loopy leaves and acorns on it.
And one that's ready.
And one that's ready for the squirrels to gobble for their autumn. So this is it, the Sessile Oak. I'm Éanna Lowna, and this lesson is on the rowan tree. Now the rowan tree is also called the mountain ash because lots of them are found growing on mountains, and the leaves look like, I suppose, the leaves of an ash tree. Look at the leaves, look at them. Yeah. They're like little leaflets. Can you count the leaflets? Can you count how many there are?
Yeah.
Count them there.
2, 4, 5.
2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 13. 13 of them indeed. And then, can we see berries on this tree?
Yeah.
Yeah, lovely, lovely bunches of orange
Are the
berries.
poisonous?
Are the berries poisonous? Well,
Can you get some?
you can eat them if you are a bird. Are you a bird?
No.
No. Or if you are a person making rowan jelly. Rowan jelly is the sourest jelly you ever saw, and you have it when you're eating venison. So I don't like rowan jelly. I think it's too sour. But you could eat them if you wanted to eat something really sour. Now, the rowan tree is a magic tree. And if you plant it, it's a good magic. If you plant a rowan tree beside your house, you won't have any witches. If you plant it on a grave, it keeps the dead from rising. And it really works. Caring is the actual Irish
How can
name.
the dead rise?
Well, exactly. This is it. The rowan tree, the magic of the rowan tree keeps them down. So this rowan tree is called Caring on Cron Caring, and it doesn't grow very tall. It's able to put up with lots of pollution, so it's often...
The dead do rise.
The dead won't rise. Don't be silly. This is only a joke. A joke. Right, okay. So we plant this in places where maybe there's pollution, maybe there's traffic. So we quite often get it in cities because the thing is, it doesn't grow very big. So it's a lovely tree to have around the place. It has flowers in spring, it has berries in the autumn time, and it gets its leaves then when the summer comes again. So, wait. I'm Éanna Lona, and this lesson is about the pine tree. Now, the pine tree is one of the very few evergreen trees that we have, and it's also a conifer. You know why it's called a conifer? Do you know why it's called a conifer?
Because they stay evergreen forever.
And it's got cones on it, isn't
Yeah.
that right? Because the conifer carries cones.
Yeah.
So the cones are where the seeds are in this. So it's a cone-bearing tree, a conifer, that's what it means in English, conifer. And here are the cones, look at them, bunches at the end. These are the female cones, and they contain the seeds. So we have the needles on the pine. Are they prickly? Put your hands on them. Do
Yeah.
they feel prickly?
Yeah.
And if I take them off, you can see, actually, that the needles are in pairs. So there's two together, look, two stuck together.
Oh.
So they're in twos, two needle pines. If you went away to the Mediterranean, you'd get trees with 3 needles or 5 needles. But the Irish Scots pine has 2 needles in it. So you can see it's a 2-needled pine. In other words, the 2 needles are joined together at the base, stuck into the tree. It nearly looks for all the world like a wishbone, doesn't it? So that tells us it's a Scots pine with the 2 needles joined at the bottom. And you'd wonder, why is it called a Scots pine if it's native to Ireland?
Because if the seeds came from Scotland.
No, Scotland, Scotia was an old name for Ireland.
Oh.
Yeah, when you think about Scotland, wouldn't you? But actually, that's why it's called the Scots pine, because it's an Irish pine. And it's very good for wildlife. I see the whole thing covered in spider's webs. Look, there's a spider's web and there's another one over there. So obviously they like to have it. And of course, what does it smell like? Have you tried smelling it? Smell it. I'll give you a big squeeze, you can smell it. It smells like turpentine. Do you know what turpentine is? Oh, there you are. You see, how would you know the smell of it?
Is that a type of snake?
No, it's not a type of snake. It's what they use in paint. It's lovely stuff to smell altogether. So lovely red bark, lovely prickly leaves, native tree. That's our Scots pine. I'm Éanna Lona, and this lesson is about the spindle tree. Now we're in the presence of a very baby spindle tree. I have to kneel down to see it. But when it grows up, it's only a year or 2 old now, but when it grows up, it can be way above her head. Now, why is it called a spindle tree? It doesn't look very spindly. And the reason is that the wood in the spindle tree is really, really hard. And they used to make spindles for them. And spindles were used for spinning wool. So you had the wool around the spindle, really hard, shutting up and down. And that was why it was called a spindle tree. Now, it was really sharp point on the end. And do you remember who pricked her finger on a spindle and fell asleep for 100 years? Sleeping Beauty. Do you remember Sleeping Beauty? And she was fast asleep because it was the wood of the spindle tree that did it for her. But this is a lovely tree. People don't plant it half enough. It's a lovely tree to grow in gardens because it doesn't grow very large. The leaves turn the most gorgeous red colours in autumn. It has lovely flowers in spring, but it has the most amazing pink berries in the autumn. In fact, I have a spindle tree at home in my own garden. I must remember not to prick my finger on the spindle, or I might be asleep for 100 years. Hello, I'm Éanna Ní and this lesson is about the strawberry tree, the arbutus. Now look at the arbutus behind me. This is a tree that has the most beautiful red bark. And on it we have fruits. And when they're ripe, they're red. And that's why we call it the strawberry tree. Now, interestingly, this is probably the only tree that has fruits and flowers on at the same time. Most things have their flowers first and then their fruits, but not this one. Here are the lovely white flowers, here are the unripe fruits, and up at the top there are actually nice red strawberries. You can see that this tree has white flowers and fruit on at the same time, and this is most unusual. It doesn't happen in other trees. When the fruits are ripe, they're bright red. Now, do they taste nice? Do they taste like strawberries? The Latin name for this tree is Arbutus unido. Unido means one only. So if you eat one, you'll never eat another because they're so sour. The fruit are bright red when they're ripe. Look how beautiful that is in the sunshine. Now, this is actually a native tree and it's evergreen. So the leaves don't fall off it in the winter time. They stay on all the year round. Most of the trees we have in Ireland occur in Britain as well, but not this one. This is an Irish tree, doesn't occur in Britain. The next time we meet this tree is down in Spain and Portugal. So it's a very typical Irish tree. Are you going to ask me a question?
Yeah. Can you make jelly out of them?
Can you make jelly out of them? I'm sure you could if you boiled them up and put enough jelly in them. Might be sour enough though.
Would they grow forever?
Well, it can grow quite old. We get some very large ones of these around the place. And down in Smerrick in County Kerry, that's Smerrick, the name Smerrick is a corruption of the Irish word for this particular tree.
Can you turn those fruit into a smoothie?
I'm sure you could, but would you like to drink the smoothie? That's the question, isn't it? So our arbutus tree then, with its lovely red bark, its lovely shiny leaves, its flowers and its fruit, there's no other tree like it. I'm Éanna Ní and this lesson is about the whitebeam tree. And here we are looking at a whitebeam tree in the Botanic Gardens. Now, why is it called a whitebeam? It's called a whitebeam because of its leaves. And when it gets its leaves in springtime, they are the most beautiful shade of pale green. But the really interesting thing, I think, is that behind the back of the leaf is a completely different colour to the front of it. The front of it is dark green, the back of it is really pale green. And as a result, it's the most beautiful tree.
I know why it's pale green on the back and it's fluffy on the back.
Why?
Because it has to grow a little bit fluffy and at the springtime, and it also has to get a bit more paler so it looks like a pale mint colour.
It looks like a pale mint colour and it's really very beautiful. So when it gets its leaves in spring, then it puts out bunches of flowers. And you know, they look like cauliflowers practically, lovely white creamy heads. And then later on, of course, we get the berries coming along in bunches. Usually the berries are in fact an orangey colour. The one here in the Botanic Gardens has a different colour on the berries. But then that's what the Botanic Gardens do best, isn't it? You have a question.
These berries look a bit like apples.
Well, that's why, because they're all in a bunch together.
Except they look a bit like fizzy apples.
Well, I think this particular white beam is one they have here, especially in the Botanic Gardens, for people to see. And like all white beams, it has white leaves on the back and green leaves at the front. So this is the leaf of the white beam, quite green on the front, but when you turn it round, you can see why it's got its name. Look how pale it is on the back, a much paler colour altogether, and really very beautiful when it comes out, first of all, in spring. So that's our white beam, Sorbus. It's actually a first cousin of the mountain ash, which is also a member of the Sorbus family. So in fact in Ireland we have two native trees from that family, the mountain ash and the white beam. I'm Aidan Ilona and this lesson is about the willow tree. And here I am in the Botanic Gardens in Dublin where they have a bog in a box. And of course part of the bog is one of our native willow trees. We have 5 willow trees that are native to Ireland and this one here, the smallest one, is native as well. Now this is obviously a small willow tree because after all trees start off small and grow up large. So if we got a large willow tree it could be maybe 20 metres tall, much bigger than any of us, big as a house. Now, do you see this willow tree here?
Yeah.
It's a deciduous tree. Look at it, look at the lovely leaves on it. So this is the willow tree, and as you can see it has lovely leaves, one opposite the other, and these are deciduous leaves, so they'll fall off once the winter comes. And willow trees have a great name in Irish. Do you know what they're called in Irish?
What?
They're called Sally trees on Salyock. So Sally trees is what they are. But in fact, from the bark of the willow tree, we can get medicine that cures pain, aspirin. Aspirin comes from the bark of the willow tree, and if you take aspirin, it stops you having pains. Do you ever take aspirin?
No.
No, aren't you glad you don't have pains and aches? And when it grows up really big, there's lovely timber in the willow tree, and they make, not hurleys, they make cricket bats from it. So that's very good, isn't it?
Yeah.
So the willow trees are in the bog, and this bog in fact is full of other things as well. Look at all these lovely fly traps, and what else can we see? Pitcher plants here, look,
Yeah.
and ferns,
And a cut-off tree.
and a cut-off tree, a lovely bit of... So a bog is a great place for biodiversity, and this particular willow tree is a big part of it. So that's my lesson on the willow tree. I'm Aidan Ilona and this lesson is about the wych elm. Now that's not a witch as in an evil person, that's W-Y-C-H, which is an old English word. Now the wych elm is here in the Botanic Gardens in a flower pot. Look at it, really small. And you might say, why have we got it in a flower pot? And actually because we nearly lost all our elms because they were all killed by Dutch elm disease about 30 years ago. Dutch elm disease came in with beetles, the beetles had holes in the trees, the fungus came out of the beetles into the tree and killed them all. So we're just trying to put them back in Ireland now, and that's what they're doing here in the Botanic Gardens. Now if you couldn't see, you could only feel, you'd know it was an elm tree. So feel the leaves. You actually feel the leaves, girls. What do you feel the leaf? Does it feel nice and smooth? Yes. No, it doesn't. It feels like sandpaper. Doesn't it feel like sandpaper, all rough? And elm trees always have rough leaves like sandpaper, like the side of a matchbox. And this roughness is characteristic of the elm tree. Now the Irish word for elm is leon, so obviously we had loads of them in Ireland once because Lucan in County Dublin is called after the elm tree. So nowadays we have to really mind them and look after them. But for though, we had lots of them around, and hopefully we'll have them all around again soon. I'm Aileen Ilona, and this lesson is about the yew tree. Now I'm here standing in front of the Irish yew. This tree was discovered in the 1700s up in Florence Court in County Fermanagh on the grounds of Lord Florence Court. One of his men brought it in from the mountains and he gave him a half-crown for it, and then he sold it to all around the world and made millions on it, I'm sure, because this, with the upright branches, you can trim it, you can clip it, you can make it into hedges, you can make it into beautiful shapes, and it doesn't change. But actually, if you take one of the berries and you plant it, it'll grow to a proper yew tree, which is a straight branch and side branches going out from the outside of it. And we had loads and loads of yew trees in Ireland long ago. What's the Irish word for a yew tree? Ure. So we have Terranure and Loughnure and Glenmalure. We have Muyo, the plain of the yew trees, Yoke Hill, the wood of the yew trees, Newry, Urkandra, place names all over the country. Now, why was such a poisonous tree so common in Ireland? And it's because it was a weapon of mass destruction. Because from the branches of the yew tree, they made longbows. So until they invented gunpowder in the 1400s, all the fighting was done with the bows from the yew tree. Now, yew trees, like holly trees, you get male ones and female ones. And this Irish yew are all female. They have lovely red berries on them, and again, the birds eat them. And if the birds eat the berries, they swallow them whole, and of course, the sticky seed comes out and grows into a yew tree, but not into one like this. It grows into a proper upright one. These are the berries of the yew tree, lovely red ones. They're called arils. The birds eat them and the stones come through and grow into a proper upright yew tree. It's amazing, in fact, that they will grow into upright trees, even though they come off something the shape of this. The leaves are terribly poisonous, and as a result, whenever we didn't need them for longbows anymore, they removed them from the countryside. You have a question?
Aren't the berries poisonous?
The berries are not poisonous to the birds because we are not birds, we wouldn't eat them. But the birds don't swallow the stones, they just eat the juice around them. Because the tree wants to have seeds, so it would be very silly of the tree to make poisonous berries and kill everything. Then we wouldn't have any more trees, would we have? No. So the leaves now are, taxus is the Latin name for this, and they have special drugs they can make from the leaves that cures cancer. So you never know how useful trees that we take for granted are. And the yew tree is a particularly useful one.
We're here in the Botanic Gardens, and today we've been making a film of the tree trail. We have a trail of Irish trees, and Aina, we're so grateful to you for coming out with our first class from St. Lawrence School. And we're also delighted that we were able to have it sponsored by the Electricity Association of Ireland today. We've done all 28 of the native trees. How did you enjoy it, Aina?
Well, it was great, and your children are natural actors.
They were very good and they loved the stories that you told. We are hoping now that other schools will join us in planting native trees in their school grounds, their local parks and wherever they can find a space.